pass my life as a stranger, Lord. Roam far in foreign lands, far, Lord, far, too far. Only he who knows he's far from home, only he, Lord, understands. Only he who knows he's far from home feels the earth and understands. Sometimes a stranger did take me in, and love I thought was near. Love, Lord, where is love? As the winds upon the desert sands whisper hope, then disappears. As soft winds breathe on the desert sands, so love sighs and disappears. Sometimes a child laughed and I did pause, and dreamed of joys at home. Joy, Lord's only a dream. For what joy is there without your smile? Empty like the ocean foam. For what joy is there without your smile? You're the sea, all else is foam. How long must I be a wanderer, Lord? You know where I belong. You know, Lord, yes, you know. Home is where my Lord's sweet presence is. I've grown tired of strangers' songs. Home is where my Lord's sweet presence is. bless me that I hear your songs.
Good morning. My name is Brooke, and I am here with Nayaswami Shivani this morning for Sunday service. And I am going to read to you next from a book called Rays of the One Light. It's a weekly commentary on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and written by Swami Kriyananda. We are on week 46, and the title of this week is The Promise of the Scriptures. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 15, we read the famous parable of the prodigal son. Jesus tells of the man who took the wealth bestowed on him by his father and squandered it in the foreign lands, where he fell into evil ways. At last, repentant, I never got that word right, he returns to his father's home. When his father saw him, he was, Jesus tells us, moved with compassion, and ran and fell upon his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. I am no longer worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Fetch quickly the best robe and put it on him, and give him a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and bring out the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. Because this my son was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and is found. And they began to make merry. Small-hearted human beings, identified as they are with their little egos, give exaggerated importance to any slight they receive from others. Thus, they imagine God, like them, to be petty, unpardoning, and vindictive. In God's eyes, however, when human beings go astray, there is nothing to forgive. All of us are aspects only of His own self. He who made us resides in us. He is not far away from us in some far-off heaven. His call to us always is to return to our home within. The way of return is described in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. Supreme blessedness is that yogi's who has completely calmed his mind, controlled his ego-active tendencies, rajas, and purged himself of desire, thereby attaining oneness with Brahma, the infinite spirit. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
So warm welcome to all of you, and also to people who are watching at a distance. Did I just turn this off? It's okay. From different parts around the world. So a happy Sunday to all of you. The parable that is in the reading today is truly one of the most beautiful and comforting in all of the scriptures. All of the great spiritual teachers teach not just through philosophy and words, which can be so dry and so boring, but through stories and examples and parables. And Jesus had many of them, and this one is perhaps the favorite of most people. I remember the film, Zeffirelli's film, Jesus of Nazareth. Have you seen that film? Oh, perhaps they'll show it here around Christmas time. We watch it every year at Christmas and at Easter, and it's a really beautiful story, the whole story of Jesus. And this parable, this scene is inserted in a very touching way. I'd like to read the entire parable, because what we heard in this brief reading is one half of the story. Because all of us as souls are making a voyage, a pilgrimage, and there is the journey outward and the return journey. And this morning we've heard about the return journey, but I'd like to go back and talk about the journey that all of us have made. This is from the Gospel of Luke, and this is the whole story, and I'm going to make some comments on it. The story begins by saying, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that falls to me. And he divided his means between them. I'd like to stop here for a moment and talk about a philosophy and a burden that is quite prevalent, perhaps much more so in Italy, which is a Catholic country, than here in America. And that is the burden of original sin. You know, this idea that we have come from sin, from mistake, from imperfection. And this story tells us that the opposite is true. So a certain man, and this is the Heavenly Father, the infinite consciousness, has 2 sons, and both of those sons are with him. And there's an elder and there is a younger son. And the younger son wants to take what is his and go out and have a good time. He wants to spend it. And the older son, by implication, is going to stay home. So let's look at these 2 sons. This parable, in addition to being beautiful and touching, is also deeply esoteric. At the beginning of creation, and in Sanatana Dharma, it's called the day of Brahma. When creation begins, all souls are a part of God. And here we see that there are 2 kinds. There's the elder and the younger. And the elder son doesn't go out. He's not making the journey that all of us are on. He's staying home. So what does this soul represent? It's very interesting, and Yogananda talks about this in his teachings, that not all souls at the beginning of creation actually come down to earth, because many of them, from the previous cycle of creation, have already attained great wisdom, and some of them have attained realization, some of them have attained freedom. Well, this elder son has attained in his past freedom from the necessity to come to earth. He has no more physical karma. So that son is going to stay home. And these souls populate the other realms. We see the physical realm, but this isn't the only realm. There are so many more beyond the physical. There's the astral and causal realms. And those realms are also just as populated as this earth is. There are billions of people on earth now, growing all the time. How many more souls are there on other planes? And they are the angels and the archangels, and even beyond that, the nearly perfected and the perfected beings. So the elder son is a symbol of those beings who haven't had to come out and play in delusion, as the younger son has chosen to do. So the younger son is a soul that is still on his journey and still feels that the physical world offers the satisfaction that it is seeking. And so this soul says to the Father, give me the share of thy wealth which falls to me. And the Father does that immediately, without hesitating. So all of us are heirs to the entire kingdom. And God will give us whatever we want for whatever purpose we want. Now, he knows that son is going to go out and squander. Okay? But he is a loving father and a wise father, knowing that the children need to go out and make their own experience, have their own experiences. They need to play, and there are so many things to play with in this world. The poet Wordsworth tells us that we don't come from original sin, but we come from the heavenly realms. Just one little quote from one of his poems, his ode, that we come trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our home. So that's where we've come from. And one of the most important things about this parable is to deeply understand and embrace that we come from that home, and we come trailing clouds of glory, and we come as the heirs of everything that we see around us. It is ours. We don't need to grasp. We don't need to run after it. We don't need to snatch it away from other people. It belongs to us. What is it? All wealth, all prosperity, all love, all wisdom, everything that our soul is seeking always has been ours. And that is such an important message and feeling to carry with us as we go through the gauntlet of this life, because everything in our life is going to try to make us believe that it is otherwise, that we are not glorious souls. Yogananda comments that as the younger son goes out to play in delusion, in Maya, as it's called in Sanskrit, that we haven't asked for it. You know, it's not that the young son decided he wanted to do that, but it's part of this play, the Leela. And Yogananda often, as he said, would quarrel very strongly with God and say to God, we didn't ask for this. It wasn't our request. It's your fault. You sent us out here, and you have to do something. You have to help us come back. And as we see in the rest of this parable, God knows that, and he's listened, not just to Yogananda, but to every other great soul who has cried out in despair, what am I doing here? And how did we get here? So the parable goes on. This is a wonderful story. And it says, and not many days later, the young son gathered up all his wealth. What is that wealth? The wisdom, the strength, everything. All of the wealth, as Yogananda says in one of his affirmations, all the wealth of this earth, all the riches of the universe belong to me, for I am thy child. So the son gathers it all up, his divine inheritance, and he took his journey into a far country. And there he squandered his fortune in loose living. So this is what the soul does. It's just like, well, I remember when, I made my first and ultimate foray out from my home, my parents' home, and went to college. Well, we won't go into the loose living that happens there, but it's just that, wow, I have this freedom. I have the license. Nobody's going to tell me not to do it. My parents are far away. There's nobody looking over my shoulder, and oh my word, what we do get into, don't we? I'm not going to tell any stories, but each one of us has so many stories to be told. We have to try it out, whatever it is. And it can be pretty big for many people. There's drinking, there's sex, there's drugs, there's fame, there's lack of integrity, there's manipulation, there's so many things to play with. And what happens to the great light that we have brought with us from our home? That's part of our wealth. The wisdom, the energy. We come out with enormous energy. And what do? We squander it. This is our good karma, and we're using it. And maybe for a while, we don't have to pay the piper. But after a time, we do. And what happens? Let's see what the story says. It says, and after he had spent it all, good karma gone, energy gone, light gone, love gone. After he had spent it all, there came a grievous famine over that country, and he began himself to suffer want. So the soul begins to realize at a certain point that it had something which it has lost, doesn't have it anymore, and it's not getting it anymore. We look for happiness. We look for, what's the word, to be, I can't find it in English. We look to be confirmed, not the right word, by other people who tell us, who praise us. And, excuse me? Thank you. We look to be validated by other people, by the job that we do. And at some point, it's just, it doesn't do it for us anymore. You know, no amount of drinking, no amount of sex, no amount of whatever gives us what we used to have. And we realize that it is diminishing. Our happiness is diminishing, our energy, our joy is diminishing. And there's a famine. Nothing is going to feed us anymore. And at this point, the parable goes on to, well, there's a little more. So he begins to suffer. He realizes that the world and what Ram, referred to as the hypnotic trance of Maya is not fulfilling us anymore. And so this young son, he went and joined one of the citizens of that country who sent him to his farm to feed the swine. It gets pretty bad, and it has to get pretty bad. We have to go all the way down. We have to go all the way out there until we are so indulgent, that we are living in many ways like animals, just on the basis of our animalistic or our survivalistic impulses. And we're not happy anymore. And he longed to fill himself with what the swine were eating, but no one offered to give them to him. So other people are feeding themselves off of their senses and the pleasures, but no one can feed us anymore because our soul is beginning to awake, and we know that we want something more. But when he came to himself, he said, now this is the moment, the trip outward has gone as far outward as it can. We're way out there. We're looking for, there's this, I don't know if I told you this story, this little experiment that sometimes is done in the psychology classes. And this is where they have the little rat in the cage. Maybe I told you about this the last time, but many of you weren't here. There's the rat in the cage, and there's 3 channels. And they put a piece of cheese at the end of the 3rd channel. And they make the rat fast, which is actually good for the rat and good for human beings too, but that's a whole other story. The rat is fasting, it's really hungry, and they open the cage, rat is starved, and it goes right out into the channel in front of it, and it doesn't find anything. Goes to the 2nd, nothing. Goes to the 3rd and finds its cheese. So every day it goes through, the scientist goes through the same scenario. The rat is hungry, opens the door, and it goes and it looks in every one. Well, after a certain number of days, the rat, being a somewhat intelligent being, figures out that the food is in the 3rd channel. And instead of going to explore the 1st and the 2nd, it goes right to the 3rd. So that happens, and then every day after that, the door opens, and the rat goes right into the 3rd channel, finds its cheese, eats it, is really happy. But one day, nasty little scientist takes the cheese and puts it in at the end of the 1st channel. So the door opens, the rat goes out, very expectant, runs down, no cheese. What does the rat do? Does it sit down? Does it lament? Does it have hysterics? No, this is a hungry rat. It goes and looks in the 2nd channel, no food, goes and looks in the 1st, finds the cheese, eats it, is happy. Next day, here's the big question. The cage opens, the rat goes out, where does it go? What do you think? What do you think? The 2nd one. No, there was never anything in the 2nd. Does it go to the 3rd? Does it go to the 1st? It goes to the 1st. The rat is a lot more intelligent than people are. Because even when there's no food anymore, this is what the parable is saying, when there's nothing that's feeding us, when it, whatever it is no longer giving us the joy, that rat's going to go and look for it elsewhere, and when it finds it, it's not going to go back. So in this parable, we see the soul that is there, and it's kept going into the 3rd channel. It used to have satisfaction. It doesn't anymore. So what does it do? But when he came to himself, he awakened to this realization. He said, "How many hired men in my Father's house have bread in abundance?" Okay. So he knows that back at home, all of the souls that are there who are serving God, God's hired hands, God's servants, they have everything to eat that they want, while I am perishing here with hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before thee I am no longer worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired men. So the soul wakes up, and it decides, it realizes this is the moment of realization, and it realizes it needs to make the journey. It needs to go back to where all of the other wise souls are that are serving God, and ask the infinite consciousness to accept him back. So he begins his return journey. After having squandered, after having nothing, after having realized that there is no satisfaction. This is in the Sanatana Dharma, the philosophy of Sankhya. And it's finished. But will God accept us back? After all that we've done, all that we've indulged in, all of the mistakes all the time that we blasphemed God and turned our back against him, talked against him, worked against him, like St. Paul. Will God accept us? So let's hear about his return voyage. And so he arose and went to his father. But while he was yet a long way off, his father saw him. This is, for me, the most important sentence in this whole parable, and it makes me a little weepy. Because we just need to start coming back. We just need to take that first step. And even when we are far away, even when, after not having meditated for how many days or incarnations, we decide that we're going to do it again, when we decide that we don't want to live as we have, when we make that first step, God knows. And when we're still very far away from perfection, he's going to come out and meet us. And he's going to bring us. Why? Because the Father saw him and was moved with compassion. God loves all of us. I mean, does he love us less when we're making mistakes? Sri Yukteswar said to Master, when you make mistakes, that's when I am more with you, because that's when you need me more. But when we are having our experiences and not finding the joy that we want and suffering, we often turn our backs and say, I don't want God to see this. You know, it's the, what's it called, where you, in denial. And we think that because we're in denial, that we need to deny ourselves in front of God. And so we stay away. That's the excuse. I've been gone for so long. How can I come back? You know, how can I mean, how embarrassing. I can't do that. I won't do that. There was a woman disciple at Mount Washington who was with Master for some years. And then she met someone, fell in love, and got pregnant and left the ashram. And some years later, after that cycle of her journey was complete, she came back to the ashram and asked Master to take her back. And of course he did. But the other disciples were a bit put off, like the elder son. You know, we've been here all the time, you know, just in hard discipline. You know, what's this taking back this person? And the woman herself said to them, do you want me to worship my mistakes? And yet how often we do. We are so identified with what we do and not who we are. So that what we do becomes who we are, and we don't know who we are. If we go someplace and nobody knows who we are, this is why people love to go to Ananda. because nobody knows who you are. You can be famous, you can be a senator, you can be an actress, you can be a famous journalist, whatever it is. But, when you come to another, nobody knows. And then all of a sudden, at first you like it. Don't have my reputation to uphold, be it good or be it bad or be it a mixture. But then you realize, oh my word, if nobody knows who I am I? And we don't know. We don't know. And we have to find that out. And that's what's called the spiritual search, the spiritual journey. Well, God knows who we are. God knows where we've come from. But we have been so long in delusion that we identify with it. And we worship our mistakes. Well, God doesn't. Not at all. There's this story. I don't know if it's true. It's just a little story. There's this priest, we'll call him Father Joseph, and one of his good friends is a rabbi. We'll call him Rabbi Shlomo. And Rabbi Shlomo, he prays every day, and he talks to God, and God talks to him. And he and Joseph are really good friends, and Joseph knows that Shlomo talks to God. And Father Joseph, he's had a long life. And he's made a lot of mistakes. He has a lot of sins, and he's really worried about them. So one day he goes to his friend, and he says, Shlomo, I have a favor to ask of you. Today, when you talk to God, would you please ask him if he would forgive me of all of my sins? And Shlomo says, Joseph, that's fine. I'm glad to do that for you. So Joseph goes back, and he's really overwrought that evening. What is God going to say? Is he going to be punished? The next day he goes to the Rebbe and he says, did you talk to God? Yes, I talk to him every day. Did you ask him if he had forgiven, if he will forgive my sins? And the rabbi says, Joseph, it's really a curious thing. When I asked God that, he said to me, I don't remember any of his sins. We do. We remember them. We carry them. It's a burden. But we don't need to do that because that's not who we are. And we don't need to be afraid to make that step back. You're having a bad meditation. Does it happen? Oh, it does. The mind is wandering. You're restless. Your legs are twitching. You're, ready to get up and do something else. And you say, forget it. I'm just going to pack it in. This was a bad meditation. But have you ever pushed through it and just tried to come back in the other direction and had the experience that sometimes it just takes that. It just takes the thought, I can go back. I don't need to keep going out into a bad meditation or into an unfulfilled life. I can turn around. And in that moment, you can have the best meditation of your life. And maybe it's only 30 seconds, but it's worth 30 days of meditation. Because we did what this prodigal son, we can do what the prodigal son does. We turn around and we take that step back. And what is God going to do? He is going to shower us with his blessings and his love because he's so happy that we learned the lesson and we're coming back. And he wants us to know how much he loves him. Well, he loves us. And so what happens? So the father says, but the father says to his servants, fetch quickly the best robe and put it on him. What's that robe? It's the robe of light. God, when we turn around, God is going to shower us with light. We'll see it. Give him a ring for his finger, sandals for his feet, all of the blessings, all of the abundance, the spiritual abundance the Father wants. Bring out the fatted calf, and let us eat and make merry, because this my son was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and is found, and thus they made merry. When one wayward child begins to come back, all of the denizens of heaven make merry. There is rejoicing in the heavens But it's very difficult for us to get to that point and to understand that there is rejoicing. Swami tells this same story very briefly in the Festival of Light that we're going to do. And in the festival, he writes, "A fledgling bird," you know these words, "once flew out into the world. Gained strength and wisdom," its parents told it. "And what you acquire, share with all, even as we have shared with you, for you are a part of all that is." That's our inheritance. We're sent out by God, a fledgling bird. Thus, we left you, Lord, countless eons ago. Now, like Master said, we had no choice in this. Ours was a holy mission. You charged us to learn great lessons from life, to be fruitful in the gifts you had given us, to expand and multiply them. But we didn't do it. We forgot about it. And we did many other things. And we think that God is punishing us, that God is judging us, because we're judging ourselves, because we identify ourselves with our mistakes. That's not who we are. That's not how God sees us. When people have a near-death experience, the ones who have committed suicide, the story of the man who was a CIA assassin and had killed many people, when they get into that world of light, they are totally accepted. They are totally loved. They are so overwhelmed by the love and acceptance that they never want to come back. But it's we who judge, not only others, we judge ourselves. How does Master feel in that moment? I'd like to read just a few lines from his poem, "When I'm Only a Dream." "I will smile in your mind when you are right, and when you are wrong, I will weep through my eyes, dimly peering at you in the dark, and weep through your eyes, perchance, and I will whisper to you through your conscience, and I will reason with you through your reason, and I will love through your love." Yeah. God, the Master, they're always with us. One last little story. Perhaps you know this one. It's about two Buddhist monks. They've made a vow of celibacy. They are never to look at or touch a woman. So there they are on their journey, and they have gone out to collect food. They've crossed the river in the morning, and they're going back to the ashram, to the head of the ashram with their food to share it with others. And as they get to the river is flooded and the bridge has been taken out. And so they're going to wade across the river. And on the bank of the river is this beautiful young woman, and she needs to get back to her home to feed her children. And she says to them, "Kind sirs, won't you please carry me? I'm not strong enough. The waters will take me away, but I have children waiting for me." And so one monk just backs away. "Oh, no, can't touch you." The other monk, without hesitating, picks her up, puts her over his shoulder, walks across the river, puts her down, sends her on her way, and the other monks continue. The other monk is horrified all the way across the river. He's yelling at his brother, "What are you doing? This is terrible. Wait till I tell our master. You've broken your vow." They get on the other side of the river. The monk lets the girl go. The other one is saying, I don't know what to do. You're my good friend, but I've got to tell everybody about this. I mean, I think we've got to kick you out of the monastery. So they go on. The first monk is silent. After about 10 miles, they're getting close to home. The other guy is still, just going off about this. And the first monk says, "Listen, I left that girl 10 miles ago, and you are still carrying her with you. Get rid of her." That's how we are. We carry our burdens with us. Well, God doesn't remember our mistakes, like Rabbi Shlomo said. Why should we? We're here. We're playing. One day we're going to awaken, that the food, all the joys, all the happiness we saw, not giving it to us anymore. We're going to go back. We can do that right now. We can do it every day. And we don't have to worry that we're going to be punished, because God is going to accept us. Because we are His. That's where we've come from. not from sin, but from light, from joy. And God and all of the great souls, they're waiting for us every day in every meditation. I'd like to read a poem. This is not from Whispers from Eternity, but it was one of Yogananda's favorite poems, and we're going to listen to him reading it. But I'd like to quote just a few lines from it. And this is The Hound of Heaven by Sir Francis Thompson. And in this poem, we see that God is pursuing the soul. He's after us. He is hunting us. And the thought of this poem is that even though we have turned away from God and are hiding from Him, He's going to find us one way or another. I'll read a little bit and then we'll hear Master. The Hound of Heaven. This is the soul talking first. I've fled him down the nights and down the days. I've fled him down the arches of the years. I've fled him down the labyrinthine ways of my own mind. And in the midst of tears I hid from him. And under running laughter, up visted hopes I sped and shot precipitate, adown titanic glooms of chasmed years. From those strong feet that followed after, but with unhurrying chase and unperturbed pace, deliberate speed, majestic instancy they beat, and a voice beat more instant than the feet. All things betray thee, who betrayest me.